Now, just define for CIOs what an application-centric infrastructure is and what the key benefits they could deliver to their organisations would be.
Okay, Mark, so let's just step back a second and ask why we need one, right? So if you have been investing over the past few years in virtualization as a technology, you'll have virtualized your servers, then you'll have virtualized the operating system that sits on those servers, and you've been able to effectively abstract one from the other, which is great because there's a whole number of savings and cost savings particularly that you get as a result of that. The thing that everybody forgot was that that type of infrastructure doesn't play very nicely with traditional IP networks. So as enterprise organizations and organizations that were running thousands or tens of thousands of virtual machines, what they were finding was that the lack of flexibility was now the network and not necessarily the data center and some of the components within the data center. So what application-centric infrastructure basically is a way of addressing that problem, removing the bottleneck. And what it allows you to do is it allows the application to almost self-provision itself across different parts of the network infrastructure. So from the end user whose PC or whose machine is connected to it, all the way through to the data center where the application is being served. And what application-centric infrastructure says is, I am this application, I would like to find the most optimum route through the network from this source to this destination, go figure that out for me. And rather than people configuring switches or configuring routers and making changes to configurations, the application is able to make a request of the network to do that. You are able to set a policy which says these are the rules of engagement that the application is allowed to have. But after that, you pretty much let it go and do itself. So it becomes a very, very highly automated way that the application can then interact both with the network and the converged infrastructure which is typically serving it.
So with a converged infrastructure, CIOs can join their applications, networks and storage more effectively, increase the speed of deployment and therefore lower costs.
So the speed of deployment comes in two areas. One, how quickly can I spin up some new virtual machines in my data center to support the application? Two, how quickly can that application seamlessly connect with the rest of the network, behave properly with other applications that are also sharing the network, and then actually all use the same resource so that what the end user sees is a seamless experience. And an example of this might be typically at the end of the month, the accounting application might require more CPU, so it makes an automated request for more availability of servers in the data center, but with that comes an implied need for more network. So what you have is a situation where in an application-centric world with converged infrastructure, the application can automatically provision what it needs. And as I said, there's no configuration or manual intervention needed for that to happen.
Nigel, beyond the IT department, I've read that organisations are adopting converged infrastructure to enable business units to self-provision IT. Has this worked in practice anywhere?
Yeah, so an example we'd like to cite would be Crédit Agricole, a large French bank and financial services provider, because what you're talking about there is infrastructure as a service. So I take the converged infrastructure platform and I enable it in a way that it becomes infrastructure that different business units within the bank can actually use, and they get a degree of autonomy as to how they spin up the different virtual machines and how they run their applications. So in the case with Crédit Agricole, they integrated a suite of software from a company called BMC. BMC provide this orchestration layer that basically allows them to go out to the different business units within the bank and say, you now have the capability to spin up infrastructure as you require. What powers that is a VBlock, but the pieces that you need in between would be classically this orchestration layer, and then a recognition rather from within the business that this is now something that they want to use. And when organizations are looking at whether they deploy private cloud versus perhaps moving out to the public cloud, this is one of the classic scenarios where an internal IT organization is able to turn around to its employer and say, we can do this as well, if not better than, an external organization. And Crédit Agricole would be a good example of that, I think.
Along with network virtualization, does this mean organizations can become more mobile and use cloud computing more beneficially?
Yeah, so mobility is almost a logical conclusion of what happens with cloud. As cloud defines how you do something, it doesn't define where you do it. If your preferred device is a tablet sitting on a Wi-Fi network in a customer's shared area, then the ability for you to be able to access your application securely, to have it perform effectively and deliver that information to you. Yes, there are a number of steps in the way, but your core infrastructure is basically ready and geared up to be able to deliver that service. And both outside and inside the organization, if people are moving to a tablet computing based model or a smartphone model where those are the preferred devices that users want to access the applications on, two things have to happen. One, those applications have to be rewritten to serve that device, so that requires an agile infrastructure to deliver it. And two, based on demand, again, that resource needs to flex up and down based on the number of people, the time of day, the day of the week. All of these are considerations. So if you put converged infrastructure in at the ground floor in terms of the ability to serve it, yes, the effect is that one, people are more inclined to use the mobile device because the experience is better. So yes, one does lead to that.
Is it legacy technology in CIO's data centers that was preventing that self-deployment and slowing the business down?
Yeah, so legacy technology by just its name suggests that it's somewhat old-fashioned. It tended to have a single vendor approach to how it was built out, so you had to invest with a particular vendor and stay with that vendor to gain any particular advantage from it. So if you were outside of that group, or you were an organization that you had no connection with that, your ability to self-provision didn't exist. Right? You would go to the IT department, you would request something, and then based on their ability to react and the infrastructure's ability to react, you get your service turned up or not, right? Because the answer might well have been no. So the older the legacy, the less flexible it is. If you take those legacy applications, in some cases you'll turn them off. In other situations, you'll actually say, I will migrate these now to a virtualized environment. The virtualized environment lends itself to self-provisioning, and the ability then of the IT organization to respond much more quickly is given by the fact that a lot of the process becomes automated. So you're putting a degree more control in the hands of the person who's making the request rather than the person who's servicing the request.